This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
You're not going to find many sports weekends better than this one. The World Series begins tonight between the Diamondbacks and the Rangers. We have got all 32 NFL teams in action. We have got the semifinals of NASCAR. I know you don't care, but I do. NBA and NHL also in full swing. We're going to break down three aspects of that delightful sports weekend for today. Talking player props with JJ Zachariason, talking World Series with Rob Friedman, the pitching ninja, and I'll talk about NASCAR later on to close out the show, which should be a spectacular weekend. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research. Join your kick things off by JJ Zachariason. Check him out on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Find his work at LateRound.com and the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. And JJ, I pray that you got exposure in some way to your guy, Chris Godwin, last night, because he has been bound for a touchdown for a very long time. You've had a lot of bad luck with him, but our guy finally came through last night. Please tell me there was some way you benefited from his touchdown.
Yeah, I benefited a little bit from the touchdown, but of course it happened on a Thursday night game when I would have totally been throwing Godwin out there as an anytime.
He was plus 240 last night. It was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, but I do think that he's a really good example of sort of what we talk about on the show a lot, where we're looking at regression and we're looking at the markets, and the markets are not baking in regression always. I mean, they are sometimes. Like Tony Pollard this week has the shortest odds to score a touchdown essentially on most books, but he's someone who's actually a huge touchdown regression candidate favorably. Like he should have way more touchdowns than he actually has, but books are recognizing that he should score a touchdown this weekend. But a guy like Godwin, like you said, plus 240, hopefully you were able to get something out of that.
Yeah, it was awesome. I celebrated, and I probably would not have been there had we not had our discussion. So I still benefited from it, even if others did not. So selfishly, thank you. But hopefully others were taking the grains of like regression discussion we had and applying that to their own betting. And hopefully that you benefit from the Chris Godwin touchdown as well. We're going to talk about the week 8 player prop landscape here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Later on this weekend, tomorrow morning, Tom Vecchio will have you ready for Sunday Night Football, Chargers and Bears via Primetime Tom. That is both here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed and FanDuel TV Plus. To get FanDuel TV Plus, go to FanDuel.com/watch and log in with your FanDuel account, or download the FanDuel TV Plus app on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku devices. Now, JJ, let's start things off here by talking about, I think, the headliner of this weekend. That is the San Francisco 49ers, because they are a very fun team for prop betting because they've got a lot of fun guys, especially when you take out one player from that equation. But now likely to have Sam Darnold starting this week as opposed to Brock Purdy. So we talked about backup quarterbacks in an earlier show and kind of how that meshes, but it's different, I think, in a Kyle Shanahan scheme, even if Trent Williams can't go. Like, I think that's a very different situation. So how do you expect things with a backup quarterback to play out when the system and the environment around him is so good?
Yeah, it's funny. On one of my podcasts called Living the Stream, not the Late Round podcast, but on Living the Stream, we got a question of, we always answer like silly questions at the end of every show. And one of the questions was, who is the worst quarterback that would be okay in Kyle Shanahan's system? Because Kyle Shanahan's system is that good that you can throw a pretty, and I think our consensus answer was Zach Wilson. Like, I think that was like the sort of go-to, but it just goes to show you that, we've seen very, very random bottom tiered quarterbacks. Obviously they're in the NFL, so they're good, but bottom tiered quarterbacks do okay and really at least be able to sustain some production in this offense. Historically with Kyle Shanahan, we had Nick Mullins in the past. There's been players who have stepped in who
DJ Beathard was below the Wilson line. We found that out at least.
Yeah, we did realize that. But they're if you look at Darnold himself, I know that he's a punchline at this point, but at the same time, he's got the pedigree. Like he's had at least some production, some good moments in the NFL. And now you're looking at him in this 49ers offense. And one of the reasons why the 49ers offense can be as good as it is, aside from just scheming guys open and such, and Kyle Shanahan being so good at that, It's predicated on yards after catch. It's predicated on getting the ball to their playmakers more so than most any other offense you're going to find. And so when you look at what they have, even with Deebo Samuel banged up and unlikely to go, I don't think he's confirmed out right now, but unlikely to go. You have CMC in the backfield, best receiving back in the league. You have George Kittle, one of the best yak tight ends that you can find. And Brandon Ayuk, I don't think people realize how good Brandon Ayuk is. But coming out of college, like his big thing was that he was amazing after the catch. And he still has been very amazing after the catch in the NFL. That's why he was such an obvious fit for Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. So I actually look at this 40. Of course, there's going to be, I'm not as optimistic as I would be if they had Brock Purdy under center. But you can look at the line and you can see how things sort of alter and change from that. And then have that sort of trickle down and domino effect down to the rest of the team from a projection standpoint. And when you look at it, it's not as big of a deal as what you're going to see with other quarterbacks. I don't want to say that Brock Purdy's a system quarterback, but I think every quarterback is a system quarterback to some degree, and we have to recognize that.
And it's also like Sam Darnold's a pretty competent backup. Like, do you want him as your starter? Probably not. But like the downgrade from generic starter to Sam Darnold is not as large. I think the big thing for me is the total coming down. It kind of hints to me that the team may be a bit more conservative, maybe a bit more run heavy. We saw McCaffrey play every snap on Monday for some reason. Like, good for him. But like, they clearly did not care about the oblique injury. And I feel like, to me, whenever I see a backup quarterback in there, like, yes, the running back may get more rush attempts, but they're also more likely to be in a negative game script. Yeah. In this situation, I kind of feel like that's less true because I could see Kyle Shanahan just kind of skewing towards the run because Darnold's good enough to keep them in a positive script. They're still 4.5 point favorites right now. Yeah. And like, I could see McCaffrey actually benefiting here. Whereas usually I don't want to bump up the running back when it's a backup quarterback starting.
Yeah. I think it's all logical. Very logical.
Alrighty, let's talk here about other fluid situations impacting week number 8. Looking across the full landscape, JJ, which fluid situations are you digging into as spots where you may see value once props are posted there?
Yeah, usually and when we talk about these fluid situations, we're talking backfields, and I have 3 backfields that I think are pretty intriguing right now. One of them is Houston, and one of the most under the radar storylines in fantasy football, in that space at least, which obviously translates to prop betting, is the Houston backfield and how they divvied up that backfield before their bye last week. Dameon Pierce, through the first 5 weeks of the season, was seeing about a 72% running back rush share per game rate. I mean, even in the week 5 game, he had 100% of the team's running back rushes. And then the last time we saw them back in week 6, Pierce ended up seeing half of the team's running back rushes because they ended up using Devin Singletary more in that backfield. Singletary saw season highs in running back rush share, target share, snaps, route participation, and they've openly talked about now, the coaching staff has, that this is a committee. I think that they're realizing that Dameon Pierce, being a good player, he is a good player, he just doesn't fit the scheme as well. I think Devin Singletary just fits a little bit better. So that's something to keep in mind. I may or may not have something more on that later on the show. The Carolina backfield's another one in that same exact game where Miles Sanders has been banged up. But if you look at any rushing metric, advanced metric, even regular metric, Chuba Hubbard has been better than Miles Sanders this year. I mean, across the board. And so Miles Sanders has been banged up, like I said, but Frank Reich comes out this week and he says, this is a committee and Chuba Hubbard's been really good. Is basically that's the short answer to what he ended up saying. And so I do think that we're going to see even more of a committee. I think that Chuba Hubbard moving forward, there's a very decent chance that he's the 1A in that backfield. It's not Miles Sanders who, to start the year was that guy. And that's a change in tune from what we saw, earlier in the offseason in August and such. And as people were drafting their fantasy teams, people thinking that Miles Sanders was going to be a bell cow. Now, he was never really a true bell cow, but he was seeing a decent amount of work to start the year. And that's sort of trickled a little bit and gone into Chuba Hubbard's favor a little bit more and more. And then the last one is the Cardinals backfield. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks. Could have talked about fluid situation with the quarterback there with Kyler Murray practicing this week. But the Cardinals backfield, man, I mean, 2 weeks ago, we saw this team without James Conner for the first time this season. And without Conner, they had a completely split. I mean, they gave Damian Williams some snaps out of nowhere. Keontae Ingram was seeing a lot of work on the ground. And then Amari DiMercato, who a lot of people thought was going to be sort of the bell cow in that backfield. He ended up seeing, the most snaps, but it really wasn't that big of a workload. But last week, he had 93% of the team's running back rushes and a 15% target share. And then this week, you look at, they've used DeMarcado as a pass catching back throughout the season / over the last 2 weeks. Like, he's been that guy for them. So I think what's really favorable for him this week is that they get Baltimore. That could be a pretty serious negative game script if things go the way that, most models would project. And so if that's the case, then we know that DeMarcado is going to be on the field. But then on top of that, what if they just use DeMarcado the exact same way as they did last week?
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's really gobbling up a lot of yards and a lot of receptions and such. So, I think there's a lot to like about DeMarcado, but it is fluid because teams can just go back and forth very quickly with how they use their running backs.
Yeah, and that usage for DeMarcado last week came when they were down by a pretty decent amount the entire game to Seattle, and the spread for the Baltimore game is now to 9.5. So like betting markets are saying that Baltimore should be heavy favorites here, so that does align well with another week for DeMarcado. Let's take a look at some yardage props over at FanDuel Sportsbook. JJ, where are you seeing value there across week number 8?
Yeah, the first one, Brian Robinson, his prop on FanDuel for rushing yards is 40.5, and I'm going to hit the under with this one. I know it seems kind of low to hit the under for a guy who's been, sort of the RB1 in his backfield this year, but he hasn't actually hit this number in each of his last 3 games. He did get to 45 the last time they faced Philadelphia earlier this year, but his percent of running back rushes in this offense was a lot more favorable then than it is now. He had a 70% running back rush share in that game. He hasn't been above a 60% running back rush share over his last 2. It was below 50% this past week. I'm worried, and the reason why this is happening, I'm worried that they're going to use rookie Chris Rodriguez more. Over the last 2 weeks, 23.5% running back rush share, 41% running back rush share this past week. Eric Bieniemy even came out and said that they want to just see what he's about, essentially. And so that tells me that he's probably going to still see some work in this backfield. And if he sees some work, that means Brian Robinson's not seeing it. So I'm going to go under. And it's a rough matchup, too, against Philadelphia, who can stop the run. And then the other one that I have, the other yardage prop, this one you can get a better number over on DraftKings. It's 53.5. It's 55.5 on FanDuel. But Christian Kirk, I like the over with that number. Going back to Kirk, did this last time when he had a really good man matchup. He's really, really good when defenses run a lot of man. And he's actually hit this. He's been over this mark of 53.5 in 5 of his last 6 games. So that's also good. But the Steelers run the third most man coverage in the league this season. So I think this could be another Christian Kirk game. Calvin Ridley seems to have more of an effect, on the team itself and not the stat sheet so much, just because he can get vertical, he can draw a lot of attention, and Christian Kirk is just getting a lot of those underneath routes that he can take, and he's got a lot of yards after catch ability. And so in this type of matchup where he can line up all over the field, the Steelers historically have been really bad against slot guys too. And so there's just a lot to like about Christian Kirk this week. So I think that you can hit the over there, probably on both sides if you really want to.
The Steelers against slot guy things goes back like 15 years. Doesn't
yeah,
it?
Yes. It's been a thing for as long, forever. It's a scheme thing for Tomlin and company. And I know they've shifted defensive coordinators a decent bit since basically Dick LeBeau, but it's basically been a problem for the Steelers since Dick LeBeau.
Well, I just remember it was some island game and Keenan Allen, young Keenan Allen's running routes against a linebacker.
He had 15 catches. Yeah.
I'm glad you remember that game too. I need that not to happen this week because I do have the Steelers money line. So if they could, let him get his yardage, but let me get my money line with the Steelers there. Which touchdown bets are you eyeing across week number 8?
Yeah, look, so I mentioned the Houston Texans backfield, right? And I like Devin Singletary a lot to see more work than what the market generally is seeing, whether that be sports books or whether that just be the fantasy market. Right now, his touchdown prop on FanDuel as an anytime touchdown scorer is plus 260. And if you look at Dameon Pierce, it's minus 110. And that delta to me just seems way, way too big. What that's telling me is that these books think that there's a decent chance that one of these running backs is going to end up finding the end zone. And it just seems like they're skewing heavily towards Dameon Pierce. But all the stuff that I talked about earlier with Devin Singletary seeing more work, there's a really favorable matchup against Carolina, who's really bad against the run. I don't think that it's that improbable to think that, Devin Singletary could see some work even within the 10-yard line, even at the goal line. That's a very possible thing. But even outside of that, he can break a 15-yard run and score a touchdown. And he's also been used as the team's primary pass catcher this year too. So I think there's just a lot to like with Devin Singletary, versus Dameon Pierce. So I'm going to go with that plus 260 instead of Dameon Pierce's -110. And then the other one that I like is Jake Ferguson as an anytime touchdown scorer. I will say the last time I talked about Jake Ferguson, he scored a touchdown, but he's plus 250 right now over on FanDuel. He only had a 3% target share the last time we saw this Cowboys offense before their bye. But weirdly enough, he had his highest route participation in that game of the season when they faced the Chargers. The Rams have been really bad against tight ends this season. They're fifth in tight end target share, adjusted target share allowed. So essentially what that tells me is that teams, when they're facing the Rams, they're throwing to their tight ends more than usual, more than their average. And Ferguson's actually a nice regression candidate. He's only scored once this year, but he should have about three or so touchdowns based on how the Cowboys have used them. So I really like Jake Ferguson this week as a plus 250 anytime touchdown scorer.
You've gotten ambitious with these. I like it. We used to have one traditional normal touchdown bet, but I think because of the success you've had, you're just kind of letting it rip, and I like it. You've gone Nathaniel Hackett with Zach Wilson on yourself and letting the touchdown bets rip.
Well, I'll say this too. Sometimes I hop on the show and I'm like a 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 in terms of confidence. I say this week with the touchdown scorers, I'm like an 8 out of 10. I think that they're very strong bets this week.
Okay, good vibes abound with JJ for this week. That is JJ Zachariason. Check him out on Twitter at Late Round QB. Find his work at lateround.com in the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. JJ, good luck to you in week number 8. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Jim.
Alrighty, again, check out JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB to find all that work, and check out the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And those are props for Sunday. But before then, we got a lot of excitement coming because tonight is game number 1 of the 2023 World Series. And who better to break it down for us than Rob Friedman? You can find Rob, of course, on Twitter at Pitching Ninja. Find his work on MLB on Fox, Peacock, and FanDuel Sportsbook as well. And Rob, it is here. The World Series has finally arrived. How you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm ready for baseball to come back.
I know. It's a weird layoff. We had 2 game 7s and there's still a long layoff. I'm glad it's a Friday because I got to talk to you for game 1, selfishly. It worked out well for my schedule. But what are you doing with your downtime between games?
I sleep, do, random stuff around the house. Nothing all that interesting.
On Twitter, though, you've been doing these fun things where you have the pitcher is blacked out and it's just the windup. And I don't know, people don't know what I'm referring to. This is totally gobbledygook to them. But it's you can just see the windup of the pitcher and not see their actual body. And you're kind of guessing who it is. I've had so much fun with those. The throwback ones, especially I've had a blast with those. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, what's insane, and this is one of those ideas that because I don't sleep really well, I woke up in the middle of the night going, I wonder if people would like this. I'd like it, so let me try it. And it's been fun. I'm always surprised at how many times people get it with every single one within the first minute, maybe. Right. Somebody gets the right answer, which is absolutely amazing to me because some of these are really hard.
Yeah, you've got great baseball fans following you, and I think that's been it's been a lot of fun. So I'm hoping you keep that up during the off season too.
Oh, I plan on it because what else is there to do? We got to have fun.
I agree. Could not agree more. Now, the reason we have Rob here for today is to break down the World Series between the Diamondbacks and the Rangers. Game number 1 begins tonight. We'll talk about game 1 specifically here in a second. But first, Rob, I want to talk to you about these two staffs because honestly, we talk a lot about bullpen mattering in the postseason, and then somehow it's the Diamondbacks and the Rangers facing off in the World Series. And I don't want to speak for you. I did not go into the postseason being super high on these two bullpens. So I'm surprised they've exceeded expectations. They've got guys going nuts in really key situations. So I want to ask you overall, accounting for starting rotation, accounting for bullpen, which team holds the edge as far as pitching staffs go for this series?
I think it's really close. I would say, especially starting pitching is fairly identical. I don't know who has an edge unless if Brandon Pfaadt keeps pitching like he does, then maybe I give the D-backs the advantage. But between Montgomery and Eovaldi and Kelly and Gallen, the top 2, flip a coin. Whatever I say is going to be wrong. I'm pretty convinced at this point. Bullpens, I probably give this slight edge to the D-backs who've just raised their bullpen game a ton in this postseason.
They certainly have. And it's been fun to watch them. It's been fun to watch individual players kind of rise in that bullpen too and pitch really well. And it's not just a small sample anymore. Like the sample on them pitching well has expanded. So like how much can your faith in those kind of surprise stars expand given that we've seen it over, 3 series now?
Well, I'm pretty much convinced Kevin Ginkel is the best pitcher of all time. And
he's the most fun pitcher of all time. I can tell you that.
Like I freaking love that dude. And I don't know where. Maybe I just wasn't paying as good attention during the regular season, but he has been on freaking fire. And that dude's slider is unhittable. His fastball's, upper 90s, and he pitches with a lot of attitude. And I love everything about that guy. And he's really helped carry this bullpen. Just made small mechanical changes a few years ago. But really, he's just risen to the occasion. He's just one of those guys.
And he's a big part of what makes the postseason fun. That's emotion. I want to watch players play with emotion, and buddy, does he do that? There is no doubt that there's.
Does he have any awards for World Series MVP? Any odds for World Series MVP?
You know what? Let's take a look here.
Because I'm going full Ginkel on this.
I love it. You know what? If we're going to be surprised by it, we might as well lean into it.
Help me find. There's no. I can't even bet on the man. Like, what is up with that?
Your guy Brandon Pfaudt's 70-1 though. That might.
I mean, that's actually a pretty good. Yeah, I mean, he's granted he won't pitch a ton, but he might.
Just throwing it out there. It's worth,
worth like that's there. Actually a really. I might chuck a bet on that.
That's not too bad. Let's talk here about what's that 70-1. Yeah, it's not bad. Let's talk about game number 1 tonight. We got Zach Gallen taking on Nathan Eovaldi, and I think with Eovaldi, my expectations coming in were pretty low because he struggled coming back from that injury. But then, my goodness, new level for him the entire postseason. Zach Gallen is Zach Gallen. So what are your expectations for these two guys entering tonight's game?
My expectations are they're going to be horses, and they're going to go deep because they're going to want to save the bullpen for the longer series. I'm hoping that I'm expecting them to get a lot of leeway today and for them to pitch well. I mean, they have a little layoff. I expect Gallen to be back to being Zach Gallen, and Eovaldi's been really good, really steady as usual in the postseason. So, I mean, I'm looking for a good bit of Ks today. I mean, I love Ks anyway, but especially today because of that matchup.
Well, that's kind of what you need for postseason K props, which are very tough. I honestly have not bet.
Oh my God, dude. I have been terrible this postseason. So honestly, if you're out there, probably do the opposite of whatever I say. It's just been really, really bad.
But I think that you're kind of looking at it from the right perspective, where like you need the narrative to align with the effectiveness, where you need to make sure they're going to go deep in that game. And I honestly agree with you, where like these are kind of the guys you want to lean on in this situation. So I get what you're saying for sure with them. I think that does make a lot of sense. And 4.5 for Gallen is low, but I feel like, Rob, honestly, it's still a stay away from me just because like these lineups are not ones that strike out a lot. And I think that's kind of the key. Like if I'm talking myself out of it, which I would love to, that's the key thing I lean on is I just don't want to target K props against these offenses.
I don't blame you. I mean, again, I can't stay off the K props, and I'm going like Gallen 6 Ks and Eovaldi 6 Ks because I expect them to go deep. Gallen pitched okay against them last time he pitched. I expect him to make a couple of adjustments. Yeah. But Lord knows I'm not that, confident on this. Like the only game, I mean, this is how bad things are going. Like I totally psyched myself out and went the under the last, game 7 and both were overs. Oh. So, I mean, I just can't buy one right now. So I figured I might as well go all in with what I think will happen. Sure. It doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Self-awareness is important, Rob. So I'm proud of you.
Definitely
That's good. That's good. We talked about Ginkel, and he's kind of an under-the-radar pitcher we could have an eye on for this series. Any other guys you have noticed throughout the postseason you want to watch here during the World Series that you want to highlight here before we get into the actual games?
Well, I mean, I would say he's not under the radar, but Brandon Pfaadt is pitching like the best pitcher in the postseason, and he deserves some respect. Like he just comes up big over and over again. And I knew it. Like you watched him all season. He had the stuff. He just had to put it together. And I think having his back against the wall, putting that pressure on him and things just clicking for him at the same time has risen his game. So I'm not kidding. When I look at those award odds, I mean, I'm giving that a consideration. I also think a healthy John Gray is important for the Rangers. I think they can put together some games that may be a slight edge to them when they can use. I mean, you have the flexibility to use Heaney, Dunning, and Gray. So that may help some of their bullpen issues and hopefully shorten some games for them.
Going back to Thought, he had a point this year where he got demoted back down to AAA. And it seems like when he came back up, honestly, like I thought I saw it in his final start before the demotion. He walked a lot of guys in that start. It's like, I get why they sent him down, but like in that start, it seemed like something clicked. And when he came back up, he was a different guy. What changed? What led to that surge for Thought that I think has honestly been over a pretty large sample at this point?
It's been over. Yeah. I mean, it's throwing strikes. His sweeper has been outstanding. I don't know what his whiff rate the last game was, something like 70-something% on his sweeper. And it looks unhittable. He marries it really well with his fastball. He's tunneling his pitches great. And it's just everything is tightened up. He dialed in his command. So I'm seeing a lot of confidence, and he's turned into the pitcher that you thought he would be. But I also thought it might be a year or two off for him. He's that pitcher right now. And if he's going to get better from this, watch out, league. Like, that guy can pitch.
He's doing it in key moments, which is really, really hard to do at that age. So I've been very impressed with him.
Unflappable. Like, I'm seeing a lot out of some of these guys. And that's what I love seeing is guys that I've been high on the whole year actually raising their game in this situation and showing what I saw.
Right.
But I saw it in small sense. You pick up these little bits and pieces, and then you see it for extended time. It's been great.
Yeah. And Fott doesn't even have this picture on FanDuel Sportsbook. Like, we got pictures for all these other guys, and Fott doesn't even have this picture. So, like, you're talking about, guys need more respect. Exhibit A, Your Honor.
Exactly. Give the dude a picture. Spores has been really good too. I kind of like his game as well. Like, give me those emotional relievers that just do their job. Is a lot of fun.
That's exactly what we want to see in the postseason. All right, Rob, it's moment of truth. Who you got winning it here for the World Series between the Rangers and the Diamondbacks?
I think the odds should be a little closer than they are right now. I mean, so I'm going to go underdog again, and I'll take the D-backs, but I think it's a coin flip. Like, this could go either way, and I could talk myself into either way, frankly.
So I have the exact same thing as you, where I have Arizona I have the actual numbers. I have Texas 56.8% to win. I have Arizona 43.1% or 43.2%. And at plus 148, that means they're a value. So even though I think the Rangers are the better team here, I think, like, from a betting perspective, the Diamondbacks are the better out. This postseason, we've seen how volatile and weird and delightful this sport is. So, like, I feel like you want to keep on exploiting that variance.
I hope, like, I enjoy it. I do think their bullpen was underrated and, gave them chances in the previous series. I still think people are selling them a little short. I mean, if you get normal games from Gallen and Kelly and then shorten games with the bullpen, I mean, you can definitely see them winning. This is not a one-sided thing. Now, it could be a sweep. Sure. It could be a sweep either way. Sure. I mean, I can definitely talk either side on this. So the fact that I'm with you. I'm looking for value. That doesn't mean at all that we're shading the Rangers, because the Rangers probably rightly so, the favorites.
Correct. Yeah. It's all about price, and the price in the situation is better on Arizona. So we both think the Rangers should be the favorites. We both think that Arizona is the better bet. I feel like that's the recipe for a good series, Rob. What more could you ask for?
I hope so.
Well, Rob, it has been a delight talking to you each Friday throughout this year. I appreciate you taking time to swing by on the show, educate us, talk about some baseball, enjoy the entire World Series, and hopefully we'll talk to you once again in the 2024 regular season.
Absolutely. I can't wait to be back on.
We'll get the intro music out to you, so you can.
I know, I kind of missed that. Like, that's the one thing that I've been missing for the last
I'll ship it out to you so you can play it periodically throughout the off season and kind of keep yourself limber before pitchers and catchers report.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
And thank you for the gifts. The weird guess the pitcher gifts on Twitter. I need those in my life, so thank you very much for those as well.
Awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
All righty, Rob. Enjoy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All righty. That is Rob Friedman. Again, check him out on Twitter at Pitching Ninja. If you want to see those really cool gifts like I was talking about, just go to his Twitter at Pitching Ninja. You can find them there. And they're a true delight. It's a lot of fun to see all those on his page. We're going to dig into NASCAR in Martinsville, second to last race before the last race before the championship race in just 1 second. But first, score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL, must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame money line wager required. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope it's here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text OPEN-Y in New York. Now, as mentioned, this is the final race of the NASCAR Cup Series before the championship race, which is next week in Phoenix, which means some drivers try to lock down that spot in the Final Four. And one of those drivers is Denny Hamlin, who is, I think, 17 points behind the cut line and, needs a win to advance to the Final Four. He notoriously has not won a championship, and he wants that this year as he's gotten past his peak, past his age 39 season. So Hamlin, a lot of motivation here. And I think that helps explain why he's 3-1 to win this race. And my model likes him. He's a favorite. But despite that, I am still almost 9 percentage points below his implied odds. Got him right around 16%. So I like Hamlin a lot. Think he should be the favorite, but he's overpriced at that number. So as a result, I do wind up showing value elsewhere. I showed value in Ryan Blaney earlier on this week. He was 12-1. He's down to plus 950, which is still a value for me, but it's not as good as it was before. So honestly, if you're just looking at the odds now, I've not taken Blaney yet. Plus 950, I'd probably wait till after practice to grab that. I think that's probably right around where he should be. I do have value on Chase Elliott 17-1, Christopher Bell 20-1, and Kevin Harvick 20-1, all at their current odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. I personally don't want to take any of those right now. I may have to qualify. Those are kind of the three guys I am most likely to bet post-qualifying are Elliott, Bell, and Harvick, because I do show a bit of value right now, but kind of want to see how things go in practice before biting there. I do show good value in 3 top 10 bets right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, though. So rather than talking about outrights, let's go there. And those 3 top 10 bets I like are Chase Elliott minus 110. I like Alex Bowman plus 200 and Daniel Suarez at plus 280. Let's start here with Chase, where this is a great track for Chase Elliott. He has been inside the top 10 in 9 of his past 11 races at Martinsville. So Hendrick Motorsports always does well here. That does include Chase Elliott. This year in the spring was not a good race for him, but it was, I believe, his first race back after a broken leg. So I don't want to hold that too much against him and overweigh that in my mind. So it's not a huge concern for me. He hasn't been fantastic on the short flat track so far this year, but did still get a top 10 in that first Martinsville race. He's been fine. And I've seen him, he's looked better from the beginning of the fall on. So I think Elliott at minus 110 is a good bet. I feel good about him. Considering the outright of those 3 guys I discussed, Elliott's probably my favorite outright because he has the most on the line. He's still in the owner's championship race, so it's a big race for his team, even if he's not in the driver's championship. So I do like Elliott minus 110 to finish inside the top 10. Also on his teammate Alex Bowman at 2-1. Bowman, not as good at Martinsville as Elliott, but still pretty good. He's run 10 races here with Hendrick Motorsports, and he's finished inside the top 10 for those. The past 2 races, he's finished 11th and 12th. So no top 10s there, but right outside the top 10. And when you look at him on the short flat track so far this year, he's still been pretty solid. The overall performance for Bowman has not been good. Missed the playoffs, not just because of his back injury, but also because when he came back, he wasn't really firing on all cylinders. So it's been a down year for sure, but he's 2-1 to finish inside the top 10. I have him at 42.4% to finish inside the top 10. His implied odds are 33%. So I think Bowman's a good value again. Second consecutive week back on Bowman, but I think that the value is there with where he currently stands. Other one is Daniel Suarez. And if you are a NASCAR fan and remember other Martinsville races, you're probably confused why we go here, because Suarez used to suck at Martinsville, was truly terrible. Even his first two races with Trackhouse, so 2011 and then the first race 2022, he finished 28th or worse in all three of those races. So even when he was in decent equipment, he was still pretty terrible. But the past two races have been very, very different. He has had a top 9 average running position in both those races. If it were just a one race sample, I'd write it off because you can see guys pop for a single race. But it's 2 races, both of which have come in the next gen car, which is what he'll race this weekend. So I put a lot of stock in those now, and I think that we can not write off Suarez's past struggles, but downplay the concerns with them. And once we do that, I have Suarez at 35.3% for a top 10. His implied odds are 26.3%, so good value in both him and Bowman. I think I agree with what the model is saying on both those. So for right now, with the Blaney outright number shortening, we'll go with Chase Elliott minus 110 for a top 10, Bowman at 200, and Suarez at plus 280 to get top 10s for this weekend. On the Xfinity Series side of things, do you have a couple outrights I like? And they're both on young guys named Smith. That is Chandler Smith and Sammy Smith, both at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, Sammy Smith is 12-1. Chandler Smith is 30-1. And let's start with Sammy, because Sammy is a guy my model has despised recently because they've been at a lot of faster tracks. And Smith, his background is in short track racing. Came up, I believe, via the Cars Tour, which is like a late model stock cars. So his background is in short tracks, and that's where he's been his best in the Xfinity Series. He actually won Phoenix earlier on this year. He struggled at the higher speed tracks, but he's been good on these. He finished runner-up in the first Martinsville race, and I buy into that. I think that Smith is a guy you need to bucket off, where when they're on faster tracks, higher speed tracks, it's okay to be away from him. But on these shorter tracks, I am very okay buying in to Sammy Smith. So Sammy Smith at 12-1, a good bet based on my numbers for this weekend. Other one as mentioned is Chandler Smith, and if you are listening to this each week, you know that I am on Chandler Smith every week, and it's no different this week. But again, I agree with what the model is saying here, where Chandler Smith it is, won Richmond. It's a very different track from Martinsville, but it's another short flat track. And he didn't just win Richmond. He dominates that track, whether it be in the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series, and he's been good at Martinsville in both series. I believe he's had a top 9 average running position in all 3 races at this track, whether it be in the Truck Series or in Xfinity. So it's a very difficult track to, really pin down. Typically, I want to lean on the veterans. And Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Daniel Suarez, all veterans of the Cup Series. So we did go that way here. But with Chandler, I think I've seen it enough between Truck Series and Xfinity on this track and on this track type where I buy into what the model is saying. I have Chandler Smith at 6.7% to win. His implied odds are 3.2%. Kind of weird vibes here because he just got let out of his contract at Colleague Racing for next year, likely going to replace Sammy Smith or John Hunter Nemechek at Joe Gibbs Racing. So next year we'll be on Chandler Smith again for sure. I can tell you that right now, but I think even with the vibes being a bit off for both these guys, because Sammy Smith is leaving Joe Gibbs Racing for Junior Motorsports, like neither guy is with this team next year, but they also do want to be in the championship race. So both these guys need wins this weekend, and I think that both guys have a shot to do exactly that. So the Xfinity Series, we'll go Sammy Smith 12-1 and Chandler Smith at 30-1, in addition to the Cup Series top 10s from earlier on. That is all that we have here for today and this week here on Covering the Spread, but it is going to be a fantastic weekend of sports. Game number 1 of the World Series tonight, NFL week number 8, NASCAR in Martinsville, NBA, NHL. It is all on the docket, and I am pumped for all of it. Don't forget that Primetime Tom Vecchio, going to preview Sunday Night Football. That podcast will be up in the Covering the Spread podcast feed on Saturday morning. It'll be on FanDuel TV Plus as well. To check that out if you want to get see some potentially value bets for the Bears and Chargers game on Sunday night. Thank you to our guests once again, JJ Zachariason and Rob Friedman. Find JJ on Twitter at Late Round QB and check out Rob at Pitching Ninja. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow me on Threads at Jim.Sannes. You can follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets and enjoy the sports this weekend. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.